Good evening, I'm Farhana Sheikh. Our top story for tonight, EU ministers meet in Brussels and approve new sanctions on Russia. That's coming up on AWANI International. EU defence and foreign ministers met earlier today in Brussels to sign off on new sanctions against Russia, with the bloc already preparing for the next sanctions package. This as Russian President Vladimir Putin held out the prospect of working on a potential truce with Ukraine following a 2-hour call with US President Donald Trump on Monday. Now, talks in Brussels centered on continued military support to Kiev, including weapons, ammunition and expanded defense aid. A sanction package is the 17th package against Russia, which include measures against its shadow fleet and its hybrid attack arsenal. The bloc is also working on expanding its existing military training and civilian support missions to protect critical Ukrainian infrastructure and boost the country's defense industry. Now, Trump said after his call with Putin on Monday that Russia and Ukraine will immediately start negotiations for a ceasefire, but the Kremlin said the process would take time. The US president also indicated that he was not ready to join Europe with fresh sanctions to pressure Moscow, much to Europe's disappointment. European leaders and Ukraine have demanded Russia to agree to a ceasefire immediately, but Trump's focus is more on getting Putin to commit to a 30-day truce. Putin has resisted both plans, insisting that conditions be met first. Global trade is shifting, but for ASEAN, this is a moment of opportunity. Rising US tariffs may pose challenges, but they also open the door for reform, from advancing technology and green trade to building new industries. Professor Chandra Mugan Tangavelu, head of the Jeffrey Cha Institute on Southeast Asia, shares how ASEAN can turn disruption into opportunities for growth.
First one is still engage US. Because still the 20%, whatever, in Cambodia is around 37%. In Vietnam, it's slightly higher, around 30% trade, and then Thailand might be around 20% or so. They need to protect that trade itself. So in the short run, there still be negotiation to protect whatever trade they have. The second track will be to seek new markets, to substitute away from the US. That's a medium-term strategy. So when you look at the way the tariff line has been put out, the tariff line that they came out, the formula, we don't need to discuss the formula, no, it doesn't make sense. But they had an Annex 2 that has the exemption clause. So they have many products in the exemption clause itself. So fairly, member countries need to how to penetrate this exemption clause so that the tariff will not apply to this set of goods. So that is, again, short run to medium term strategy in how I'm going to engage US. The third one is still ASEAN as a trading bloc, ASEAN centrality, because that pins down the 80% of our trade. So I don't think so there'll be a serious delinking or decoupling away from China itself, because we already embedded ourselves in the ASEAN. So under that framework, under the legally binding framework, of 30% of the global trade, 30% of the global investment, 30% of the world population in that framework is going to consolidate further. So ASEAN has made quite a significant reform over the last 3 decades or 4 decades. Now is seriously the time to go deep dive into technologies, into green trade. So it's an ample opportunity for us to actually reform and create another set of frontier in ASEAN itself. So what Trump reciprocal tariff has given us is an ample opportunity to reform and create new industries, new kind of services, a new framework of thinking for the next stage of growth. A new kind of architecture will emerge faster and faster, I think.
Right, we will go for a quick break. Don't go anywhere.
Wow, excitednya!
Bermulanya di sini.
Kita nakkan quality wise yang layak terpilih.
Lagi banyak driver, lagi clarity tu lebih lah.
Borhan lah, mungkin macam Borhan dan Borhan.
Ikuti kisah perjalanan mereka ke pentas Big Stage Alpha di Astro Ria dan Astro Go.
Daulat Tuanku.
Welcome back. Taiwanese President Lai Ching-te says the island is open to talks with China, but must continue strengthening its defences in case Beijing uses military force to assert its sovereignty claim. Marking 1 year in office, Lai delivered a message of peace, even as China continues to label him a separatist and rejects his repeated offers for talks.
The Taiwanese government had earlier warned that Beijing might mark the anniversary with military drills. Lai highlights that preparing for war is the best way to avoid it, adding that Taiwan would continue procuring arms from abroad, develop its domestic arms industry, and work closely with allies to boost deterrence. Over the last few years, China has stepped up military drills around Taiwan in a seeming bid to intimidate or exert pressure on the island. Last month, it held war games codenamed Straight Thunder 2025A near the island, with the A at the end implying there could be more to come. Taiwan's Defense Ministry also reported that in the past 24 hours, 6 Chinese military aircraft and 11 naval vessels were detected near the island.
The World Health Organization kicks off its annual World Health Assembly in Geneva on Monday, drawing hundreds of officials, donors and diplomats, but notably without its traditional top funder, the United States. This year's assembly focuses on strengthening global health efforts amid a major funding shortfall driven largely by US cuts.
WHO Director General Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus highlighted the agency's financial challenges, urging member states to support its extremely modest $2.1 billion annual budget. The revised budget, 22% lower than initially planned, reflects reduced contributions from the US and other Western nations, with only 60% of the 2-year budget is funded, leaving a $1.7 billion gap. While avoiding direct mention of the US, Tedros has previously called Washington's decision to withdraw a mistake, urging it to reconsider. With the US prepared to exit, China is set to become the biggest provider of state fees, one of WHO's main streams of funding alongside donations. China pledged an additional quota of $500 million to WHO over the next 5 years, reaffirming Beijing's commitment to global health and voicing strong support for WHO's leadership role in coordinating international health efforts. Running through May 27th, the Assembly is WHO's top policy-setting forum, where members finalize key strategies and budget decisions. In a major development, member states have voted in favor of a global treaty to strengthen pandemic preparedness, marking a significant milestone in global health governance.
Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei doubts nuclear talks with US will succeed. He dismisses Washington's demand for Tehran to stop enriching uranium as excessive and outrageous, urging the US to avoid making such unrealistic demands during negotiations.
While the US views uranium enrichment as a potential step toward nuclear weapons, Iran insists its nuclear program is purely for peaceful purposes. Although a 5th round of negotiations was expected in Rome over the weekend, discussions remain uncertain as both sides continue to clash over uranium enrichment issue. Earlier today, Iranian Deputy Foreign Minister Kazim Gharibabadi confirmed that Tehran is reviewing a new proposal from the US. Last week, President Donald Trump issued a stark warning to Iran, urging it to act swiftly or face serious consequences, including possible bombings and tougher sanctions, if no agreement is reached on its nuclear program.
them to succeed. I want them to...
In other news, China's fiscal revenue continued to decline in the first 4 months of the year, but at a slower pace than in the first quarter, offering some relief to policymakers grappling with the impact of U.S. tariffs. Official Finance Ministry data released Tuesday showed total fiscal revenue from January to April at $1.12 trillion, down 0.4% year-on-year.
This is an improvement from a 1.1% fall in the first 3 months of the year. Tax revenue fell 2.1% from January to April, while non-tax revenue jumped 7.7%. Meanwhile, fiscal expenditure rose 4.6% in the same period, reflecting strong government spending. China's economy remains under pressure from a prolonged property slump, rising debt risks, subdued confidence, and ongoing trade tensions with the U.S. While exports performed better than expected, April's data revealed persistent deflationary concerns, with factory gate prices marking their steepest fall in 6 months. To cushion the blow, Beijing unveiled a series of stimulus measures earlier this month, including rate cuts and a major liquidity boost, just ahead of a breakthrough in US-China trade talks in Geneva, signaling a significant easing of tensions.
The U.S. has imposed significant tariffs on solar panel imports from Southeast Asian countries, with Malaysia being hit with a countrywide rate of 34.4%. Dr. Juwita Mohamad, consultant of the UN Trade and Development, shares how this will impact both the solar and the semiconductor industries and their competitiveness in the global market.
In Malaysia, even though there are a few solar panel producers, and these solar panel producers are mostly backed by China, and there are Chinese-owned companies. But again, it will impact our strength, which is in testing and packaging. So in the long run, if these companies do move away, and if investments in the strategic pockets of the supply chain is stalled, then we might see a weakening in our semiconductor positioning in the region and in the world. So in the past, Malaysia was one of the biggest exporters of solar panels due to the relocation of Chinese producers here. And at that time, it was I think it was Obama's time, when they targeted not just Chinese-produced panels, but also Malaysian-produced panels here, that we really had a very negative impact to our local industry here. So with such a high hike of about 34%, again, with producers and exporters having to operate with very narrow and very slim profit margin, and possibly in the medium term, with the dampening of global demands, not just from the US and possibly as well from China, we may see a longer negative impact if we don't do anything to try to either implement trade diversification or product diversification in the near term.
Right, that report wraps up AWANI International. Stay tuned for reports on the rivalries, strategies and the shifts behind the power affairs driving the new global order. Visit international.astroawani.com for more, and be sure to follow our social media accounts, Power Affairs. That's all for now. I'm Farhana Sheikh. Thank you and good night.